The champagne flute slipped from Damien Cross's fingers, crystal shattering against marble as 3 words from his maid's phone call pierced through his heart like bullets. Please don't kill her. I'll send you the password tonight. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to smash that subscribe button for more. Also, share your thoughts, and let me know where you're watching from. Tomorrow's story is going to be just as epic, so don't miss out. Now, let's continue. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Vincent Blackwood's downtown Seattle office as Isabella Santos sat rigid in the leather chair, her hands trembling despite her desperate attempts to remain composed. The man across from her, silver-haired, cold-eyed, wearing a smile that never reached his eyes, spread photographs across his mahogany desk like a dealer laying out a losing hand. Your mother looks comfortable, doesn't she, Isabella? Vincent's voice was silk-wrapped around steel. The private medical facility we've arranged is quite luxurious. Experimental cancer treatments, round-the-clock nursing care, the best money can buy. Isabella stared at the photos of her mother, Maria Santos, lying in a hospital bed, looking small and fragile against white sheets. The woman who had raised her alone, worked 3 jobs to put her through MIT, sacrificed everything so Isabella could become one of the country's top systems engineers, now trapped in a gilded cage, her life hanging by the thread of her daughter's compliance. The debt your mother accumulated before her diagnosis, Vincent continued, pulling out another folder, $200,000 in medical bills that insurance mysteriously refused to cover. Quite a burden for a woman on a cafeteria worker's pension. You manipulated the insurance claims, Isabella said through clenched teeth. She never owed that money. Prove it. Vincent's smile widened. Though I suppose that's academic now. What matters is that Cross Industries' rival company, my company, owns that debt. And we're prepared to forgive it entirely, plus fund your mother's continued treatment, in exchange for a simple favor. Isabella closed her eyes, knowing what was coming but praying she was wrong. Damien Cross is about to unveil the quantum computing breakthrough that will make him the most powerful man in tech. His presentation to the Global Innovation Council next month will secure him a $50 billion government contract and cement his legacy forever. Vincent leaned forward. Unless, of course, his systems are compromised. Unless someone he trusts provides us with the intelligence we need to ensure our competing bid succeeds instead. You want me to spy on him? I want you to work for him. As household staff, you'll have access to his private spaces, his personal files, his unguarded moments. You'll provide us with everything we need to discredit his technology and present our own as the superior option. Isabella felt sick. And if I refuse? Vincent gestured to the photos. Your mother's treatment ends tomorrow. The debt collectors begin pursuing her assets. And I'm afraid her prognosis without proper medical care is quite grim. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Outside, Seattle's skyline glittered with the lights of legitimate businesses, honest people living honest lives. Isabella had never envied anyone more. There's a beauty to this arrangement, Vincent continued. You're not just any systems engineer, you're brilliant, educated, sophisticated. Cross will never suspect that his charming new housekeeper holds advanced degrees from MIT. You'll be hiding in plain sight. How long? 6 weeks. Long enough to document his security protocols, copy his core algorithms, and identify the vulnerabilities we need to exploit during his presentation. Isabella thought of her mother's laugh, the way she still called her Mija like she was 5 years old, the proud tears in her eyes when Isabella had graduated summa cum laude. All of it balanced against betraying a man she'd never met, destroying achievements she could appreciate as a fellow innovator. If I do this, she said quietly, you'll release her debt and continue her treatment? The moment Cross's presentation fails and our contract is secured, your mother will be free to go home. You have my word. Your word isn't worth much. Perhaps. But it's all your mother has. Meanwhile, 15 floors above in his penthouse office, Damien Cross was experiencing his own kind of trap, the prison of success achieved in isolation. At 44, he possessed everything a man could want. 6'2" with an athlete's build maintained despite 16-hour workdays, steel-gray eyes that had closed billion-dollar deals, and dark hair silvering at the temples in a way that made him look distinguished rather than old. His hands moved across holographic displays, showing the quantum processor that would revolutionize computing forever. 6 years of 18-hour days, countless failures, breakthrough moments that came at 3 a.m. when the rest of the world slept. Tomorrow he would unveil it to the Global Innovation Council, and the $50 billion defense contract would be his. But as Damien stood in his perfect penthouse, 30,000 square feet of imported marble, smart glass, and technology that responded to his thoughts, he felt the familiar emptiness that success had brought him. His ex-wife's words echoed in his mind, "You've built a beautiful empire, Damien, but you're its only prisoner." She'd been right. In pursuing greatness, he'd forgotten how to live. In creating revolutionary technology, he'd lost touch with simple human connection. Tomorrow's presentation would cement his legacy, but who would share in his triumph? His current household staff was efficient but distant, a rotating roster of professionals who cleaned his space and disappeared like ghosts. What he needed was someone who could bring life back into his sterile sanctuary, someone who understood that even revolutionaries needed human warmth. His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Cross? The staffing agency has sent over a new candidate for the head housekeeper position. Isabella Santos. Her credentials are exceptional." Damien glanced at the resume on his screen. MIT graduate with degrees in systems engineering and computer science, fluent in 4 languages, impeccable references. Overqualified didn't begin to cover it. Why is someone with these qualifications applying for domestic work? Personal circumstances, sir. Family medical expenses. Damien understood that burden. His own parents had died in a car accident when he was Isabella's age, leaving him alone with their medical debts and a determination to never be that vulnerable again. Send her up. When Isabella walked into his office 20 minutes later, Damien felt something shift in the room's atmosphere. She moved with quiet grace, wearing a simple black dress that suggested professional competence without trying to impress. Her dark eyes met his directly, confident but not challenging, and when she smiled, it was genuine warmth rather than calculated charm. "Mr. Cross, thank you for seeing me. I'm Isabella Santos. Please sit." Damien gestured to the chair across from his desk. "I have to ask, with your educational background, why are you interested in household management?" Something flickered across her face. Pain, perhaps, or resignation. Family circumstances require immediate income. Sometimes we take paths we never planned to walk. I understand. My own journey hasn't followed a straight line. For the next hour, they discussed her qualifications, his needs, the logistics of managing a high-security environment. But what struck Damien wasn't her competence, it was her presence. She asked intelligent questions about his work, showed genuine interest in his innovation, and somehow made his sterile office feel warmer just by being in it. "When could you start?" he found himself asking. "Tomorrow, if you need me." "I think I do need you," Damien said, meaning it more than he probably should. As Isabella left his office with employment papers in hand, Damien watched her reflection in his smart glass windows and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation for someone else's presence in his life. Neither of them could have predicted that their carefully planned arrangement, his need for human connection, her desperate bid to save her mother, would become the foundation for something neither expected and both desperately needed. Sometimes the people we trust most are fighting battles we can't see. What do you think drives someone to accept an impossible choice? Share your thoughts below. 3 weeks into Isabella's employment, Damien's penthouse had transformed from a sterile showcase into something resembling a home. She moved through his space with intuitive understanding, organizing his research materials in ways that somehow made perfect sense, preparing meals that nourished rather than simply sustained, and bringing a warmth to rooms that had felt cold for too long. More surprising was how naturally conversation flowed between them. Isabella possessed a brilliant mind that could grasp complex technical concepts, ask insightful questions about his work, and offer perspectives that challenged his thinking in productive ways. She was overqualified for household work not just because of her degrees, but because of the quality of her intellect. "Your quantum processing approach," she said one evening as she organized his research notes, "have you considered the potential vulnerabilities in the entanglement protocols?" Damien looked up from his holographic display, startled. "That's actually a sophisticated question. Most people don't understand quantum entanglement well enough to identify potential weaknesses." Isabella's cheeks flushed slightly. "I read voraciously. Science journals, technology publications. Working in your environment has exposed me to concepts I find fascinating. What would you suggest?" For the next hour, they discussed his work with a kind of intellectual intimacy Damien had never shared with another person. Isabella's insights were brilliant, her questions probing, her understanding of complex systems intuitive. By the time they finished, Damien felt more connected to another human being than he had in years. "You should be running your own research lab," he said as she prepared to leave. "Your mind is extraordinary." "Life doesn't always offer us the paths we'd choose," Isabella replied softly. "Sometimes we find meaning in unexpected places." The warmth in her voice, the way her eyes lingered on his face, the electricity that seemed to spark between them, Damien was beginning to recognize the signs of something deeper than professional appreciation. He was falling for his housekeeper, and from the way she looked at him, the feeling might be mutual. But that evening, as Damien worked late in his study, Isabella's phone rang with a tone he'd never heard before, sharp, insistent, almost aggressive. Through his office's acoustic design, he could hear her answer in the hallway. "¿Qué quieres ahora?" Her voice was tight with tension. "What do you want now?" Damien's Spanish was fluent from years of international business, and what he heard made his blood run cold. "No he conseguido to do todavía. Necesito más tiempo. I haven't gotten everything yet. I need more time. ¿Cómo está ella? Está recibiendo el tratamiento. How is she? Is she receiving treatment?" There was a pause, then Isabella's voice broke. "Por favor, no lo hagas daño. Estoy haciendo lo que me pidieron. Please don't hurt her. I'm doing what you asked." Damien felt ice form in his veins. Someone was threatening someone Isabella cared about. But the next words shattered his world completely. "Los archivos de seguridad son más complicados de copiar de lo que pense. Si tengo acceso a su oficina, pero él está empezando a sospechar algo. The security files are more complicated to copy than I thought. Yes, I have access to his office, but he's starting to suspect something." The wine glass Damien had been holding, a 1982 Bordeaux he'd been saving to celebrate tomorrow's milestone, slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers. It shattered against the white marble floor, deep red liquid spreading like blood across the pristine surface. "Los protocolos están en su computadora personal," Isabella continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Puedo conseguirlos antes de la presentación, pero necesitan darme hasta después del evento. Entiendo que tiene una mamá. Entiendo que mi vida depende de esto." The protocols are on his personal computer. I can get them before the presentation, but they need to give me until after the event. I understand you have mama. I understand my life depends on this. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the penthouse like a gunshot. Everything Damien thought he knew crashed down around him in the space of a 30-second phone call. The woman he'd been falling in love with, the brilliant mind he'd been sharing his life's work with, the warm presence that had made his sterile world feel alive, all of it was a lie. "Mr. Cross." Isabella appeared in the doorway immediately. Her phone call ended, her face flushed with what he now recognized wasn't embarrassment but fear. "Are you hurt? Let me clean that up." "I'm fine," Damien managed, his voice sounding strange and hollow to his own ears. Just clumsy. But as Isabella knelt to clean up the broken glass, moving with the same graceful efficiency she'd shown for 3 weeks while systematically stealing his life's work, Damien felt something die inside his chest. Not just his trust in her, but his trust in his own judgment, his capacity to read people, his belief that the connection they'd shared was real. "There," Isabella said, straightening with her usual warm smile that now looked like the most elaborate mask he'd ever seen. "Good as new. Is everything all right? You look pale." "Fine. Just tired. Tomorrow's presentation is weighing on me." "You'll be brilliant," Isabella said with conviction that would have touched him an hour ago and now felt like poison. "What you've created will change the world." "Yes," Damien replied quietly. "I'm sure it will be revelatory." After Isabella left, walking to whatever contact point where she would report on his security vulnerabilities, Damien sat alone in his violated sanctuary and tried to process the devastation. The woman he'd begun to love was systematically destroying him. Worse, someone was threatening her mother, which meant Isabella might be as much a victim as he was. But the recordings on his security system told the full story. Isabella Santos, MIT graduate, wasn't just some desperate woman forced into espionage. The technical questions she'd asked, the insight she'd offered, the access she'd gained, she was a highly skilled operative, and she played him perfectly. Damien pulled up her employee file, cross-referencing it with databases his security team maintained. What he found made his stomach turn. Isabella Santos existed, but she'd never worked for any of the companies on her references. Her mother, Maria Santos, was indeed in a medical facility, but not for cancer treatment. She'd been reported missing 3 months ago, and the police investigation had gone nowhere. Someone had kidnapped Isabella's mother and was using her as leverage to force Isabella to spy on him. Which meant tomorrow's presentation, 6 years of work, billions in contracts, his entire legacy, was walking into a trap. What would you do if you learned that the person betraying you was being forced to choose between your dreams and their family's life? Share your thoughts below. Damien spent the night staring at security footage, watching Isabella move through his penthouse over the past 3 weeks. Every smile, every laugh, every moment of intellectual connection, all of it took on sinister new meaning. She'd photographed documents when he wasn't looking, accessed his personal computer during her cleaning sessions, and systematically cataloged every security protocol in his home. But there were other moments too. Times when she thought she was unobserved, when her professional mask slipped and he could see genuine pain in her eyes. The way she touched the photo of an older woman she kept in her purse. The careful way she handled his research, as if she understood its value beyond mere espionage. The tears she'd quickly wiped away after particularly difficult phone calls. By morning, Damien had made a decision that surprised even him. Instead of calling security, instead of having Isabella arrested, he would confront her directly. Because underneath the betrayal and the lies, he'd seen something real in her, pain that matched his own, intelligence that couldn't be faked, and moments of genuine connection that felt too authentic to be entirely performance. Isabella arrived at 8 a.m. as usual, moving through her morning routine with practiced efficiency. She prepared his coffee exactly how he liked it, organized his presentation materials for the afternoon's rehearsal, and maintained the warm professional demeanor that had fooled him so completely. "Isabella," Damien said as she arranged documents on his desk. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth." Something flickered in her eyes. Fear, recognition, resignation. "Of course, Mr. Cross. Who has your mother?" The question hit her like a physical blow. Isabella staggered backward, her careful composure cracking completely. For a moment, she looked like what she probably was, a terrified daughter willing to do anything to save the woman who raised her. "I don't know what you mean," she said, but her voice was shaking. "Vincent Blackwood." Damien guessed, watching her face. "He's been trying to outbid me for the defense contract for months. It would make sense for him to target my security through someone I trust." Isabella closed her eyes, and when she opened them, Tears were streaming down her face. How long have you known? Since last night. I heard your phone call. Then why haven't you called the police? Damien studied her face. The genuine anguish, the exhaustion that came from weeks of living a lie, the love for her mother that had driven her to accept an impossible choice. Because I think you're as much a victim in this as I am. And because... He paused, struggling with emotions he'd been trying to deny. Because what I felt between us, the connection, the conversations, I need to know if any of that was real. Isabella sobbed openly now, her professional mask completely shattered. It was real. God help me, it was the most real thing in my life. I was supposed to seduce you, gain your trust, make you care about me. But I never expected to care about you back. Tell me everything. For the next hour, Isabella told him the truth. Her mother's cancer diagnosis. The medical debt that had appeared mysteriously after insurance claims were denied. Vincent Blackwood's ultimatum, spy on Damien or watch her mother die. The agonizing choice between betraying a good man and losing the only family she had left. He has her in a private facility, Isabella said, her voice broken. Good medical care, but essentially a prison. The deal was simple. Copy your security protocols, document your quantum processor's vulnerabilities, and ensure his competing bid succeeds. In exchange, Mama's debt disappears and she gets the treatment she needs. And you agreed. I agreed. But Damien... She looked at him with desperate honesty. The moment I started working for you, I knew I'd made a terrible mistake. You're brilliant, kind, passionate about your work in ways that inspire everyone around you. You didn't deserve what I was doing to you. But you kept doing it. Because they have my mother. The words exploded from her with desperate force. Every day I didn't deliver what they wanted was another day she suffered. I tried to give them false information, partial files, anything to buy time while I figured out another way. But they're not stupid, and they're not patient. Damien felt his anger warring with understanding. Isabella had betrayed him, yes, but she'd been trapped in an impossible situation with no good choices. The presentation is this afternoon, he said quietly. What happens then? Vincent expects me to deliver your final security protocols and the complete technical specifications for your quantum processor. With that information, his team can expose vulnerabilities in your system during the Q&A session, making your technology look unstable and their competing bid more attractive. And if you don't deliver? Isabella's voice was barely a whisper. Mama dies. They sat in silence, the weight of impossible choices hanging between them. Finally, Damien spoke. What if there was another way? There isn't. I've looked for months. Vincent has too much power, too many connections. Even if I went to the police, by the time they investigated, Mama would be... Isabella. Damien's voice was gentle but firm. What if I told you that I think there might be a way to save your mother and stop Vincent, but it would require you to trust me completely? Hope flickered in her eyes, quickly followed by fear. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe we're stronger together than either of us is alone. Maybe the connection we built, even if it started with deception, is real enough to overcome the lies. Isabella stared at him with wonder and disbelief. You want to help me? After everything I've done to you? I want to save your mother. I want to stop Vincent. And I want to find out if what we had was worth fighting for. What do you think Damien's plan might be? Share your thoughts below. The Global Innovation Council's presentation venue was a fortress of glass and steel overlooking Seattle's waterfront, where the world's most powerful tech leaders would gather to award the $50 billion defense contract that would reshape the future of computing. In 6 hours, Damien would either secure his legacy or watch it crumble under the weight of Vincent Blackwood's manipulation. But first, he and Isabella had work to do. The plan is risky, Damien said as they sat in his secure home office, holographic displays showing the venue's layout and security protocols. If Vincent suspects what we're doing, your mother. I know. Isabella's voice was steady despite the tears that had been falling intermittently since their morning confrontation. But I can't keep betraying you. Even if it costs me everything. It won't cost you everything. Because we're going to outsmart him. Damien activated a new display showing Vincent Blackwood's company structure, financial records, and known associates. I've been investigating Vincent for months, knowing he'd try something to sabotage my presentation. What I found is a pattern of corporate espionage going back years, always targeting competitors just before major contract awards. How does that help us? Because patterns create vulnerabilities. Vincent expects you to deliver my real security protocols and technical specifications. Instead, we're going to give him something better, false information so convincing that he'll use it to expose himself. Isabella leaned forward, her engineer's mind immediately grasping the implications. A trap within a trap. Exactly. You'll deliver modified files that contain deliberately placed vulnerabilities, not in my system, but in his understanding of my system. When he tries to exploit those vulnerabilities during the presentation, he'll reveal that he has illegally obtained proprietary information. But that still leaves Mama. No, it doesn't. Damien's smile was sharp. Because while Vincent is focused on humiliating me publicly, we'll be executing a rescue operation to free your mother. For the next 4 hours, they worked side by side with an intensity that transcended their complicated history. Isabella's knowledge of Vincent's operations combined with Damien's resources and technical expertise created a plan that was elegant in its simplicity. Give the enemy exactly what he expects, but make it a weapon pointed at his own heart. The quantum processor specifications you'll hand over, Damien explained as they fine-tuned the false data, will suggest that my system is vulnerable to electromagnetic interference at a specific frequency. Vincent will undoubtedly plan to demonstrate this vulnerability during my presentation. But your actual system isn't vulnerable to that frequency? Not only is it not vulnerable, but any attempt to generate that kind of interference will trigger security protocols that will trace the signal back to its source. Vincent will be caught red-handed attempting to sabotage a defense contract presentation. Isabella studied the modified files with admiration and growing hope. This is brilliant. But the timing has to be perfect. It will be. My security team will be in position to rescue your mother the moment Vincent makes his move. He won't be able to use her as leverage once he's under arrest for federal crimes. As they worked, something unexpected happened. The professional distance between them dissolved, replaced by the kind of partnership that went beyond mere collaboration. They moved through complex technical problems with intuitive understanding, each anticipating what the other needed, their minds working in harmony despite the chaos surrounding them. Damien, Isabella said during a brief break, I need you to know something. These past weeks, working with you, talking with you about your research, it wasn't all performance. Your passion for innovation, your dedication to creating something that could change the world, the way you see technology as a tool for human advancement rather than just profit, all of that inspired me in ways I haven't felt since graduate school. Isabella. Let me finish. I know I've destroyed any chance of trust between us. I know that after today, even if we succeed, you'll never be able to look at me without remembering that I lied to you for weeks. But I want you to know that the woman who fell in love with your brilliant mind and generous heart, that woman was real. Even if everything else was a lie. Damien reached across the table and took her hand, startled by how right the contact felt despite everything between them. The woman I fell in love with was real too. The questions you asked, the insights you offered, the way you made me remember that innovation means nothing without human connection, none of that could have been faked. Where does that leave us? I don't know. But I know that whatever happens today, I want to find out. Isabella's phone buzzed with the aggressive tone they both recognized. Vincent's handler, demanding an update. Isabella looked at the screen, then at Damien. It's time, she said. Are you ready? Isabella squared her shoulders, the brilliant MIT graduate shining through the mask of the desperate daughter. I'm ready to stop running from my choices and start fighting for what matters. As they prepared to leave for the presentation venue, Damien in his best suit, Isabella with a hidden earpiece and the false documents that would hopefully save them both, the weight of their impossible gamble settled between them. In 3 hours, they would either destroy Vincent Blackwood and save her mother, or lose everything they'd built together. But for the first time since this nightmare began, Isabella felt something she'd almost forgotten: hope. The Global Innovation Council's auditorium buzzed with anticipation as 300 of the world's most influential tech leaders, government officials, and defense contractors took their seats. The $50 billion quantum computing contract would be awarded today, and everyone present understood they were witnessing a moment that would reshape the future of technology. Damien stood backstage, adjusting his tie with hands that remained steady despite the enormity of what they were attempting. Through a gap in the curtains, he could see Vincent Blackwood in the third row, looking supremely confident as he reviewed notes on his tablet. Somewhere in the audience were Vincent's technical experts, ready to spring their trap during the Q&A session. What Vincent didn't know was that his trap had become his cage. Mr. Cross. Isabella appeared beside him, looking elegant in a dark suit that transformed her from housekeeper to the brilliant engineer she'd always been. To anyone watching, she was simply another member of his technical team. The files have been delivered as planned. Damien nodded, noting the tension in her voice. According to their plan, Isabella had met with Vincent's handler an hour ago, delivering the modified technical specifications that contained the false vulnerabilities. If everything went according to plan, Vincent would attempt to exploit those vulnerabilities during Damien's presentation, exposing himself as a corporate spy in front of the entire Global Innovation Council. Any word on your mother? My contact confirmed she's still at the medical facility. Security has been increased, but your team is in position. Isabella's voice was carefully controlled, but Damien could see the fear in her eyes. If this goes wrong. It won't go wrong, Damien said with more confidence than he felt. Vincent's arrogance will be his downfall. He's so convinced of his superiority that he won't question the intelligence you've provided. Ladies and gentlemen, the moderator's voice echoed through the auditorium. Please welcome Damien Cross, CEO of Cross Industries, presenting the next generation of quantum computing technology. Damien walked onto the stage to thunderous applause, the holographic displays behind him showing the sleek design of his quantum processor. For 6 years, this moment had been his obsession, the chance to prove that his revolutionary approach to quantum computing could solve problems that had plagued the field for decades. Distinguished colleagues, Damien began, his voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. Today I present technology that will fundamentally change how we process information, solve complex problems, and secure sensitive data. The cross-quantum processor represents not just an advancement in computing power, but a new paradigm for how machines and humans can work together to tackle the greatest challenges of our time. The presentation unfolded flawlessly. Damien demonstrated processing speeds that exceeded current technology by several orders of magnitude, showed real-time problem-solving capabilities that left the audience speechless, and outlined applications that ranged from medical research to climate modeling to national defense. But as he spoke, Damien was acutely aware of Vincent in the audience, checking his tablet, making notes, preparing for what he believed would be Damien's humiliation. Somewhere in the building, Isabella was monitoring communications between Vincent and his team, waiting for the signal that would trigger the rescue operation for her mother. The security protocols embedded in the cross-quantum processor, Damien explained, approaching the moment when Vincent would make his move, represent the most advanced encryption technology ever developed. The system is immune to traditional hacking methods and protected against all known forms of electromagnetic interference. In the audience, Vincent smiled, a predator sensing weakness in what Damien had just said. According to the false specifications Isabella had provided, the system was vulnerable to electromagnetic interference at exactly 2.4 GHz, a frequency that Vincent's team was prepared to generate. Mr. Cross, Vincent stood during the Q&A session, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding attention. "Your presentation is impressive, but I have concerns about the security claims you've made. Please, share your concerns. Independent analysis suggests that your quantum processor may be vulnerable to electromagnetic interference, particularly in the 2.4 GHz range. Given that this technology is intended for defense applications, shouldn't the Council be concerned about such vulnerabilities?" Damien felt a rush of satisfaction. Vincent had taken the bait perfectly. "That's an interesting hypothesis, Mr. Blackwood. Do you have evidence to support such a claim?" "As a matter of fact, I do." Vincent gestured to his technical team, who began setting up equipment that Damien recognized as electromagnetic pulse generators. "With the Council's permission, I'd like to demonstrate this vulnerability." The moderator looked confused. "Mr. Blackwood, this is highly unusual. How did you obtain information about Mr. Cross's security specifications?" Vincent's confidence faltered slightly, but he pressed forward. "Through legitimate competitive analysis, of course. If Mr. Cross's technology is as secure as he claims, this demonstration should pose no threat to his system." "By all means," Damien said with a slight smile, "proceed with your demonstration." Vincent's team activated their electromagnetic pulse generator, targeting Damien's quantum processor with precisely the frequency they believed would disrupt its operation. The audience held its breath, waiting to see if the revolutionary technology would fail under attack. Instead, something entirely different happened. The moment the electromagnetic pulse hit Damien's system, security protocols activated throughout the auditorium. Alarms sounded, security personnel converged on Vincent's position, and holographic displays showed the pulse being traced back to its source in real time. "Ladies and gentlemen," Damien announced calmly, "what you've just witnessed is not a vulnerability in my system, but a demonstration of its security features. Any attempt to attack the cross-quantum processor is automatically traced, recorded, and reported to appropriate authorities." Vincent's face went white as he realized he'd been trapped. FBI agents, who had been positioned throughout the auditorium as part of Damien's security arrangements, moved quickly to surround Vincent and his team. "Vincent Blackwood," the lead agent announced, "you're under arrest for corporate espionage, attempted sabotage of a federal defense contract, and conspiracy to commit fraud." But even as Vincent was led away in handcuffs, Damien's attention was focused on Isabella, who was receiving urgent communications through her earpiece. Her face had gone pale, and she was moving quickly toward the exit. Something had gone wrong with the rescue operation. 20 minutes after Vincent's arrest, Damien found Isabella in the venue's parking garage, pacing frantically while speaking rapid Spanish into her phone. Tears streamed down her face, and her hands shook as she gestured, despite no one being able to see her. "¿Qué quieres decir con que así la llevaron? ¿Dónde está mi madre? What do you mean they took her? Where is my mother?" Damien's blood ran cold. The rescue operation had failed. "Isabella," he said gently, approaching her carefully. She spun around, her face a mask of anguish and rage. "They moved her. Vincent's people moved Mama before your team could get to her. She's gone, Damien. They have her somewhere else, and now Vincent's in custody, so there's no one to negotiate with. My security team is still." "Your security team failed." The words exploded from her with desperate fury. "We destroyed Vincent, yes, but his organization is bigger than just him. They have contingency plans, other facilities, other handlers. And now Mama is paying the price for my betrayal." Isabella sank against a concrete pillar, sliding down until she was sitting on the cold garage floor. Her composure, maintained through weeks of impossible choices, finally shattered completely. "I did everything wrong," she whispered. "I should have gone to the police from the beginning. I should have found another way. I should have protected her better." Damien knelt beside her, his expensive suit touching the dirty concrete. "You did the only thing any daughter would do. You tried to save her." And I failed. God, I failed her so completely. No, Damien said firmly. We're not done fighting. Vincent may be in custody, but that doesn't mean his operation shuts down immediately. There are still people we can find, pressure we can apply, resources we can use. Isabella looked at him with eyes that held too much pain. Why are you still helping me? Your presentation was a success. Vincent is destroyed. You've won everything you wanted. Because winning means nothing if the people we care about are suffering. Damien reached out and took her trembling hands in his. Because 3 hours ago, you chose to trust me despite every reason not to. Because you risked everything to help me succeed, even knowing it might cost you the only family you have left. Damien. Because I love you, Isabella. Not the spy, not the housekeeper, not the desperate daughter. I love the brilliant, courageous woman who made impossible choices and still found the strength to do what was right. Isabella stared at him, tears flowing freely. How can you love someone who lied to you for weeks? How can I not love someone who was willing to sacrifice everything for her family? You showed me what real courage looks like, not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite being terrified. Before Isabella could respond, Damien's phone rang. Marcus, his head of security. Sir, we have a development. One of Vincent's associates has agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity. He's provided locations for 3 facilities where they might be holding Mrs. Santos. Damien looked at Isabella, seeing hope flicker back to life in her eyes. Which facility is closest? 20 minutes from your location. Sir, I should warn you, if we're wrong about the location, if we tip them off, they might move her again or... We'll take that risk, Damien said, helping Isabella to her feet. Because some things are worth any risk. The drive to the medical facility was silent except for Isabella's whispered prayers in Spanish. Damien drove his Tesla at the absolute limit of Seattle speed laws, while Isabella monitored communications between his security team and federal agents who were coordinating the rescue operation. There, Isabella pointed to a nondescript building that looked like any other private medical facility. That's where Vincent's contact said they're holding the high-value patients. Damien parked as close as possible, and they watched as FBI agents surrounded the building. Through his earpiece, Damien could hear the tactical team reporting their positions, preparing for coordinated entry. All teams go, came the command. For 10 agonizing minutes, they waited in the car while Isabella gripped Damien's hand hard enough to leave marks. Finally, Marcus's voice came through the earpiece. Target acquired. Mrs. Santos is safe and secure. She's conscious, responsive, and asking for her daughter. Isabella sobbed with relief, her body shaking as weeks of tension finally released. She's alive. She's okay. She's more than okay, Damien said, pulling her into his arms. She's free. And so are you. 20 minutes later, Isabella ran through the doors of the legitimate hospital where her mother had been transferred, with Damien close behind. Maria Santos, a small elegant woman in her early 60s, was sitting up in bed, weak but alert, tears of joy streaming down her face as her daughter burst into the room. Mija, Maria whispered, pulling Isabella into a fierce embrace. I knew you would find a way. I never doubted you. Mama, I'm so sorry. I should have protected you better. I should have. You did exactly what any daughter would do, Maria interrupted, her voice firm despite her weakness. And you found someone who was willing to help you do it. Maria's eyes moved to Damien, who hung back respectfully near the door. You must be the man my daughter has been in love with for weeks. Isabella blushed furiously. Mama, I never said. Mija, you think I don't know my own daughter? Even when you called under duress, I could hear it in your voice when you talked about him. This man who treated you with respect, who inspired you, who made you remember why you loved innovation in the first place. Damien stepped forward, extending his hand. Mrs. Santos, I'm Damien Cross. Your daughter saved my life today, in more ways than one. Maria took his hand with both of hers, studying his face with the sharp intelligence Isabella had inherited. She chose well, she said finally. Though I suspect you both have some talking to do about trust and forgiveness and what comes next. Isabella and Damien looked at each other across the hospital room, the weight of everything they'd been through hanging between them. They'd exposed a criminal conspiracy, saved Maria's life, and discovered that love could survive even the most devastating deceptions. But they'd also learned that trust, once broken, required more than good intentions to rebuild. 3 weeks after Vincent's arrest and Maria's rescue, Isabella sat in Damien's penthouse living room feeling like a stranger in a place that had briefly felt like home. The criminal charges against Vincent had made international headlines, the defense contract had been awarded to Cross Industries as planned, and Maria was receiving the best cancer treatment money could buy at Seattle's top medical center. By every objective measure, they had won completely. So why did victory feel so much like loss? The FBI finished their investigation, Damien said, entering the room with 2 cups of coffee and the careful politeness that had characterized their interaction since that night in a hospital. All charges against you have been dropped. Officially, you're classified as a victim rather than a co-conspirator. That's good news, Isabella replied, accepting the coffee with hands that didn't quite touch his. Thank you for everything you did to make that happen. You don't need to thank me. Don't I? Isabella's voice carried an edge of frustration that had been building for days. You saved my life, my mother's life, my freedom. I'm not sure how someone repays that kind of debt. It's not a debt, Damien said sharply. It never was a debt. But even as he said it, both of them could feel the distance between them, emotional walls that had grown higher every day since the crisis ended. In the immediate aftermath of trauma, adrenaline and relief had carried them through. But as normal life resumed, the weight of deception began to settle between them like a permanent shadow. I've been thinking, Isabella said carefully, that maybe it would be better if I found other employment. Now that Mama's medical care is secured, I don't need to. Is that what you want? Damien interrupted. Isabella met his eyes directly. I want to stop feeling like I'm walking on broken glass every time we're in the same room. I want to stop seeing the moment you realized I'd been lying to you reflected in your face every time you look at me. The words hit Damien like physical blows because they were absolutely true. Despite his best efforts, despite his intellectual understanding of her impossible situation, he couldn't shake the memory of discovering her betrayal. Every conversation felt loaded with subtext, every gesture analyzed for hidden meaning. Isabella. No, let me finish. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she set down her coffee cup. What we had during those 3 weeks was beautiful. The connection, the intellectual intimacy, the way you made me feel like I could be myself despite living a lie. But that's just it, I was living a lie. Everything you fell in love with was built on deception. That's not true. Isn't it? Isabella stood, pacing to the window that overlooked the Seattle skyline. You fell in love with your brilliant housekeeper who appreciated your work and challenged your thinking. But I was never actually your housekeeper. I was a corporate spy who was paid to understand your work well enough to steal it. You were forced into that situation. I was, Isabella agreed. But that doesn't change the fact that our entire relationship began with me deceiving you. Every conversation we had, I was cataloging information. Every smile I gave you, I was playing a role. How do we build something real on that foundation? Damien felt something crack inside his chest. So what are you saying? I'm saying that maybe love isn't enough. Maybe some wounds are too deep to heal, some trust too broken to repair. Isabella turned from the window, tears streaming down her face. I'm saying that I love you too much to keep hurting you with my presence. You're not hurting me. Every time you look at me, you remember being betrayed. Every time I speak, you wonder if I'm telling the truth. Every time we touch, You think about how my hands photographed your documents while you weren't looking. Isabella's voice broke completely. That's not love, Damien. That's torture. The silence that followed was deafening. Damien wanted to deny her words, wanted to insist that they could overcome anything together. But the honesty that had always been his strength wouldn't let him lie, not to her, not to himself. She was right. Despite everything they'd been through, despite understanding her impossible choices, despite loving her with an intensity that scared him, he couldn't forget. The memory of her betrayal lived in his mind like a splinter he couldn't remove, coloring every interaction with suspicion he didn't want to feel. Maybe, Damien said quietly, you're right. Maybe some things can't be forgiven, even when they should be. Isabella nodded, though fresh tears fell with each word. I'll pack my things tonight. I've arranged for Mama's continued care through the Victim Compensation Fund. You won't have to see me again. Isabella, wait. This is the right choice, Damien. For both of us. You deserve someone who has never lied to you, never stolen from you, never put you in danger. And I deserve the chance to rebuild my life without constantly reliving the worst choices I've ever made. She walked toward the door, then paused without turning around. For what it's worth, every feeling I had for you was real. Every moment of connection, every spark of attraction, every word of admiration, that was Isabella Santos, not the spy. That woman loved you completely, even while she was destroying you. I know, Damien whispered. I hope someday you'll remember her instead of what she did. The sound of the door closing behind her echoed through the penthouse like a gunshot. Damien stood alone in his perfect, empty home and realized that winning everything he'd thought he wanted felt exactly like losing everything that actually mattered. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from the people we care about most. Do you think some betrayals are unforgivable, even when we understand why they happened? Share your thoughts. For 2 months, Damien threw himself into his work with a single-minded intensity that had built his empire. The defense contract was proceeding ahead of schedule, international orders for his quantum processors were pouring in, and cross-industry stock price had reached record highs. He should have been celebrating the greatest professional triumph of his life. Instead, he felt hollow. The penthouse that had once felt sterile now felt haunted. Isabella's presence lingered in every room. The way she'd organized his research files, the meal she prepared, the conversations that had made him feel less alone for the first time in years. He'd hired a new household staff, but they moved through his space like efficient ghosts, providing service without connection. Worse were the nights when he couldn't sleep, staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of their time together. Not the betrayal, he'd processed that intellectually, understood her impossible choices, even forgiven her on a rational level. What kept him awake was remembering the woman who'd challenged his thinking, laughed at his jokes, and looked at his work with genuine appreciation and insight. The woman he'd fallen in love with hadn't been the spy. She'd been Isabella Santos, brilliant engineer, devoted daughter, someone capable of extraordinary sacrifice for the people she loved. The fact that her sacrifice had temporarily included deceiving him didn't negate the love that had grown between them. It took a call from an unexpected source to make him realize how badly he'd failed them both. Mr. Cross? This is Dr. Jennifer Martinez from Seattle Cancer Center. I'm calling about Maria Santos. Damien's blood turned to ice. Is she all right? She's stable, but she's been asking for you. She says there's something she needs to discuss regarding her daughter. An hour later, Damien sat beside Maria's hospital bed, struck by how much she resembled Isabella. The same intelligent eyes, the same quiet strength, the same grace under pressure. Thank you for coming, Maria said, her voice weak but determined. I know you and Isabella aren't speaking currently. How is she? Broken, Maria said simply. She's found work with a cybersecurity firm in Portland, using her real skills for the first time in months. She's good at her job, respected by her colleagues, financially stable. And she's absolutely miserable. Damien felt something twist in his chest. Mrs. Santos. Maria, please. And let me finish before you say whatever polite nonsense you've prepared. Despite her illness, Maria's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. My daughter made terrible choices. She lied to you, stole from you, put you in danger. I'm not here to excuse that or ask you to forget it. Then why? I'm here to tell you what love actually looks like. Maria's eyes met his with unflinching directness. When Isabella was 12, she stole a candy bar from the corner store. Not because we didn't have money for candy, but because she wanted to see if she could get away with it. When I found out, I marched her back to that store to confess and apologize. Damien listened, unsure where the story was heading. The store owner was a kind man who'd known our family for years. He could have called the police, made a big scene, taught Isabella a harsh lesson about consequences. Instead, he looked at this terrified little girl who was trying to do the right thing and said, "Stealing is wrong, but admitting your mistakes takes courage. Why don't you work here after school for a week to make up for what you took?" I don't understand. That man understood something about forgiveness that took me years to learn. Isabella had done something wrong, yes. But she was also a good person who'd made a bad choice, and she deserved the chance to make it right. The question wasn't whether she'd stolen, it was whether he would help her become someone who would never steal again. Maria paused, studying Damien's face. You have every right to protect yourself from being hurt again. But ask yourself this. Is Isabella the same person who accepted Vincent's deal 2 months ago? Because from where I'm sitting, she's someone who chose truth over survival, who risked everything to protect you, who walked away from the man she loved rather than continue hurting him with her presence. She lied to me for weeks. Yes, she did. And then she told you the truth, knowing it would destroy everything between you. And then she chose your safety over her mother's life. And then she chose your peace of mind over her own happiness. Maria's voice was gentle but relentless. At what point does someone stop being defined by their worst choice and start being recognized for their best ones? Damien sat in silence, feeling the walls he'd built around his heart beginning to crack. I love my daughter, Maria continued. But I'm not asking you to love her out of pity or obligation. I'm asking you to decide whether the woman she became through knowing you is someone worth fighting for. Because that woman, the one who risked everything for truth, for justice, for love, that woman is real, and she's suffering without you. What if I can't forget? What if every time I look at her, I remember? Then you look harder, Maria interrupted. You look until you see past the mistake to the person. You look until you remember that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about choosing someone imperfect and deciding to build something beautiful together anyway. That evening, Damien stood in his penthouse office, staring at a business card he'd kept in his wallet for 2 months. Isabella Santos, Senior Cybersecurity Analyst, Portland Digital Solutions. He'd looked at it countless times, always stopping short of making the call. But tonight, as Seattle sparkled beyond his windows and the success he dreamed of felt meaningless without someone to share it with, Damien finally understood what Maria had been trying to tell him. Love wasn't about trust earned, it was about trust given. Not because someone deserved it, but because you chose to offer it. Isabella had betrayed that trust once, yes. But she'd also proven what she would sacrifice to preserve it. Damien picked up his phone and dialed. Isabella. Her voice was wary, surprised. Damien? Is everything okay? Is Mama? Your mother is fine. Isabella, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Of course. If I showed up in Portland tomorrow, if I asked you to give us another chance, to start over and build something real together, what would you say? The silence stretched for so long that Damien thought she might have hung up. When Isabella finally spoke, her voice was thick with tears. I'd say that I've been waiting for that phone call every day for 2 months. I'd say that I love you enough to try again, even knowing we might fail. I'd say that you're the best man I've ever known, and if you're willing to take a chance on someone who's made terrible mistakes, then I'm willing to spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice. Then I'll see you tomorrow. Damien. Yes. Thank you for calling. Thank you for giving us another chance. As Damien hung up the phone and began making travel arrangements to Portland, he realized that the greatest innovation of his life wasn't quantum computing technology. It was learning that love, real love, wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing to trust someone with your heart, not because they'd never broken it, but because they'd proven what they'd do to protect it. 6 months later, the penthouse that had once felt like a sterile monument to success hummed with life and laughter. Isabella moved through the kitchen with the same graceful efficiency she'd shown as Damien's housekeeper, but now she wore jeans and one of his MIT sweatshirts, her hair loose around her shoulders as she prepared Sunday dinner for the 3 most important people in her world. "Mama, be careful with those wine glasses," Isabella called as Maria Santos carefully set the table, moving slowly but steadily in her recovery from cancer treatment. "Damien bought them in France, and I refuse to be responsible for breaking his fancy crystal. Mija, I survived Vincent Blackwood's kidnapping and 6 months of chemotherapy. I think I can handle wine glasses," Maria replied with a dry humor that had sustained her through the worst moments of their ordeal. Damien emerged from his study, where he'd been putting finishing touches on the presentation that would announce his engagement to Isabella at tomorrow's Cross Industries board meeting. He paused in the doorway, watching the 2 women who had transformed his empty penthouse into a home, and felt the familiar flutter of gratitude that hit him whenever he realized how close he'd come to losing this. "Something smells incredible," he said, wrapping his arms around Isabella from behind and pressing a kiss to her neck. "Mama's teaching me her secret recipe for arroz con pollo," Isabella replied, leaning back against his chest. "Apparently, the key is using exactly the right amount of saffron and never, ever rushing the rice." "The key," Maria corrected from the dining room, "is cooking with love instead of obligation. Food tastes different when it comes from the heart." Damien felt Isabella tense slightly in his arms. Even after 6 months of rebuilding their relationship, she still sometimes worried that references to obligation might remind him of their complicated beginning. He tightened his embrace, a silent reassurance that those days were behind them. "Speaking of cooking with love," Damien said, reaching into his pocket for the small velvet box he'd been carrying for weeks, "I have something I want to ask you." Isabella turned in his arms, her eyes widening as she saw the box. "Damien, I know we've talked about this, but I wanted to do it properly." Damien dropped to one knee in his own kitchen, surrounded by the smell of saffron and the warmth of family, holding up a ring that sparkled with the same intensity as the quantum processors that had brought them together. "Isabella Santos, you challenged everything I thought I knew about trust, about love, about what it means to choose someone despite their imperfections." Isabella's hands covered her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. "You showed me that love isn't about finding someone who's never made mistakes. It's about finding someone who learns from them, someone who chooses truth over comfort, someone who fights for what matters even when the cost is everything they hold dear." "Damien," Isabella whispered, "you are the most brilliant, courageous, passionate woman I've ever known. You're also the only person who's ever made me feel like success means nothing if there's no one to share it with." Damien's voice was steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that love really can overcome anything?" "Yes," Isabella sobbed, dropping to her knees to meet him. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." As Damien slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, because he'd secretly borrowed one of her rings to ensure accuracy, Maria's applause filled the penthouse, along with her delighted laughter. "About time," Maria called from the dining room. "I was beginning to think you'd never work up the courage." "You knew?" Isabella asked, holding up her hand to admire the ring. "Mija, the man has been carrying that box around for 3 weeks. Every time he looked at you, his hand went to his pocket. I was starting to worry he'd chicken out and I'd have to propose for him." Damien and Isabella burst into laughter, the kind of deep, joyful sound that comes from being completely, authentically happy. As they helped each other to their feet, Isabella caught sight of something on Damien's desk through the open study door. Is that the proposal you're presenting to the Innovation Council next week? The quantum encryption project? Yes, but it's not ready for review yet. May I? Isabella's eyes lit up with the same intellectual curiosity that had first drawn Damien to her. I have some ideas about the security protocols that might interest you. You want to work on it together? If you'll have me as a partner. Damien smiled, remembering another evening months ago when Isabella had asked intelligent questions about his quantum processing approach. But this time, she was asking as herself, Dr. Isabella Santos, brilliant engineer, devoted daughter, the woman who'd risked everything for truth and love. Always, he said. In everything. As they moved toward his study, arms around each other, Maria called after them, dinner will be ready in an hour. Try not to get so lost in your algorithms that you forget to eat. We won't, Isabella called back, then turned to Damien with a smile that held all the warmth and promise of their future together. Though I should warn you, when I get excited about a technical problem, I tend to pace and gesture wildly. I remember, Damien said, thinking of all the evenings they'd spent discussing his work when he'd thought she was just an extraordinarily bright housekeeper. It was one of the first things I loved about you. Even though I was lying about who I was. You weren't lying about who you were, Damien corrected. You were lying about why you were there. But the woman who got excited about quantum entanglement, who asked brilliant questions, who made me feel less alone, that woman was always real. Isabella stopped walking and looked at him with wonder. How do you do that? Do what? Take my worst moments and find the best parts of them. Take my biggest mistakes and show me how they led to something beautiful. Damien cupped her face in his hands, marveling at how right this felt. Not despite their complicated beginning, but because of everything they'd overcome together. That's what love is, he said simply. It's looking at someone's broken pieces and seeing how they might fit together to create something stronger than what came before. Isabella's kiss tasted like tears and laughter and coming home. As they broke apart, she whispered, I love you too. More than quantum processors, more than perfect algorithms, more than anything I ever thought possible. Even though I'm stubborn and obsessive and sometimes forget to eat when I'm working? Especially because of that, Isabella laughed. Though I should warn you, I plan to spend the next 50 years making sure you remember to eat. Deal, Damien said, pulling her toward his study where holographic displays showed the future they would build together. But only if you let me spend the next 50 years proving that the best innovations come from understanding people. Especially the one person who means everything. As they settled down to work side by side, their engagement ring catching the light from Seattle's skyline beyond the windows, Maria's voice drifted from the kitchen, humming an old Spanish lullaby while she cooked dinner for her family. The wine glass that had shattered months ago when Damien first overheard Isabella's desperate phone call had been replaced by something stronger, a love built not on perfection, but on the choice to see past mistakes to the person underneath. It was the kind of love that could survive corporate espionage, family kidnapping, and the devastating discovery that everything you thought you knew was incomplete. It was, Damien realized as he watched Isabella's brilliant mind attack his quantum encryption challenges with passionate intensity, the most beautiful algorithm he'd ever encountered. Two imperfect people choosing each other, again and again, creating something infinitely more complex and wonderful than either could achieve alone. Have you ever experienced a love that was strong enough to survive betrayal and build something even more beautiful from the pieces? Sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the worst mistakes. What do you think makes a relationship strong enough to overcome anything? Share your thoughts below, because sometimes the most impossible love stories are the ones most worth believing in. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next. Click on the image or video showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.